open the floor. Let us hear what some of our viewers have to say. Let's see. Ruthendo, anyone has got something to say? Ruthendo, a question?
Hi. No, I don't have a question. Are we allowed to add on to what you say?
Yes.
Yes, you're welcome to add on. It's a conversation. Engage. Feel comfortable.
Thank you. I needed to just clarify some of the things that you were saying, because he articulated very well. We cannot talk about Zimbabwean sanctions being targeted. Firstly, because of one fundamental fact. How did the United States decide who it was going to target with their sanctions when it never took anyone to court to try them for these human rights violations that they talk about? Number two, they also were trying people for human rights violations, yet they are not authorized by the UN Charter, which they are a member of, because the UN Charter has got a Human Rights Council that is supposed to try people or supposed to investigate, because they are endowed with the capabilities to investigate human rights violations. And they never found Zimbabwe guilty, or any minister or any public official from Zimbabwe guilty of human rights violations. So how exactly did the United States target? Did it make sure that people were guilty without trial, which is a violation of the UN, of the Human Rights Bill of Rights, which is a violation of human rights in its own respect? How did they decide that these people are human rights violators? Which court did they try them in? Which tribunal did they take them to? How did they prove that these people were guilty? And if they didn't prove it, then they're doing the same thing that they were doing in slavery, where slaves were guilty just because the master said they were guilty. They're doing what was happening during colonialism, where it is black people were guilty just because they were resisting colonialism. And then we go further to the issue of when they did decide that these targeted people were guilty. Who and which law in international law says that people must be punished by sanctions and collective punishment of civilians? Because those are the sanctions that are in Zimbabwe. Zidera is a collective punishment of Zimbabweans, because the Zimbabwean government, its parastatals, even its local governments, which belong to MDC, cannot get loans. But more critically, Zimbabwe cannot get cancellation of colonial debt. And you must understand how important this point is. Mr. Mukupe was in the Ministry of Finance. His duty was to make sure that Zimbabwe works. But Zimbabwe, when it got independence, the very first thing that the Lancaster House Conference did, and the Western partners did, is they put the debt of the Rhodesian government on top of our government. They put illegal debts that were taken by the Rhodesian government illegally while it was under UN sanctions. Zimbabwe is not under UN sanctions. And the debts that were taken by the Rhodesian government at high interest of sometimes over 11% were passed on to Zimbabwe. Those debts had to be paid by 1987. These high interest debts. Now, anybody who understands finance understands that every 7 years, any interest that's above 10% doubles. So we were having a debt by the Rhodesians, who were taking weapons to punish our parents, to stop independence, put on Zimbabwe. So the effect of the Rhodesian sanctions were put on Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe was supposed to pay these debts. And the IMF in 1982 actually forced the Zimbabwean government to take more loans to repay the debts, to make sure by 1987 those debts were repaid. And all this affected Zimbabwe in the aspect that we were not given reparations for 90 years of colonialism. We were given the colonial debt, and that caused us now to be in the arrears that you see us owing the IMF and all these multilateral and lending institutions. These are all problems that were caused by Zidera, because it refused us to cancel those debts. We should have had the option to cancel some of these colonial legacy debts, and we can't cancel them today because of Zidera. So Zidera is not on targeted people, it's on the Zimbabweans, it's on their municipalities, their governments, which affects the normal person. Then we go on to the executive order.
Why do you think Zimbabweans are so misinformed? A lot of them, if you ask them, what sanctions are we under? What are we? They don't know. If you ask them, what is Zidera? They don't know. Why do you think this is, that there's just a breakdown in communication on what sanctions are? People just know we have sanctions, but no one knows what it actually means.
Thank you, God, for that question. It's because our government hasn't created awareness. And I think a lot of people understand that I'm a very big Mugabe supporter. I've never really been an ED supporter. However, Mugabe did nothing to conscientize the Zimbabwean people about sanctions. When sanctions were imposed on Zimbabwe, the United States declared 3 national emergencies against Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe under Mugabe did not declare a national emergency as well against these sanctions. The sanctions were war on the Zimbabwean people, but the government of Zimbabwe did not make this a national issue and a national defense issue to inform people, because information is the only way to beat these sanctions. Getting Zimbabweans to know that they are under sanctions, getting Zimbabweans to know that these sanctions are a violation of human rights, and getting those people whose human rights are being violated to stand up against the United States and challenge them for the hypocrisy. Now, Mugabe didn't do anything. ED comes in, and in 2 years' time, he's already started to create a campaign, a public campaign. He has gone to SADC, he has gone to the AU, and created more awareness and public campaign against these sanctions than what has been done before. This was the problem for the past 18 years, and I think we might have changed now that we've got a president who believes that we need to publicize the problem of sanctions, and we need to start having a concerted effort to denounce these sanctions and to show their criminality and violation to human rights.
Thank you very much for your comment, Ruthendo. Do we have anyone else on the floor who would like to give their 2 thoughts?
And
Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Welcome to Hot Seat Africa. I'm your host, Ruthendo Bochidwala. Welcome. May you please give us what are your thoughts on tonight's program on sanctions, on the human rights violations, on the sanctions march that happened on the 25th?
They are naive about the corruption that is in the country. I must say that there is so much traction that is taking place in the country from the administration point of view to arrest the issue of corruption. And one sad thing is that those that are in the opposition, corruption is a say name called ZANU-PF. They do not demonstrate or even condemn the mismanagement and poor service delivery that is in the municipalities that they are running. Yet, when we are saying, let us as a collective march or demonstrate against sanctions, they decide to vilify people, to denigrate people, give them names, and even think that we are not or we are in support of the corruption that is taking place in the country. Yet all what we are saying, this is the time that we need to come together as a collective and tell the world that sanctions are hitting right on the innocent people in the country. What we have seen among us, many people who speak about corruption, they go out in the public arena, talk about corruption, they have no action whatsoever. And they even speak ill of those that are taking action against the corruption. And all what we ask from Zimbabweans that are patriotic, let us speak with voice. And these vices that we are facing are vices that are not, that do not face ZANU-PF alone or MDC or any other people in a particular grouping. They affect all Zimbabweans. Therefore, they need a collective voice. Sanctions should go. Let us all go. And sadly, what we have seen, even today, we have seen it. Sidangarembwa was saying sanctions are an effective way of making sure that the government can hear. So she also wants sanctions to continue. And that's sad to hear from Zimbabweans of a caliber, also still urging these Americans to make sure that sanctions continue. Like what Fadzai was doing or she's doing on a daily basis, and many others. It's sad that are failing to understand the effects of sanctions in Zimbabwe and also in the region. That's my 2 cents contribution today.
We appreciate your contribution. Okay, we're about to round off for the evening, and we will the session of Hot Seat Africa. But to close off, what would you say to, there's MDC, there is so much division amongst our people. The people are just so tired and so fed up. The energy, the atmosphere in Zimbabwe right now is so heavy. People are just fed up. People are tired. People cannot afford to buy even a full month's groceries. A lot of people are receiving $20 a month. People with degrees, most of them don't even have jobs. I've never had a job. What is the way forward? How can us as a platform and create dialogue, how can this help our situation? Because what we ultimately want to do as Hot Seat Africa, we want to create a place for dialogue, to get those people who are fed up and tired to say, come meet the policy makers, come meet the people in charge, cut them, explain to you exactly what is going on, not hearsay, but hear it for yourself. What would you say to the people on the ground?
No, I think I appreciate people like yourselves and the platforms that you're coming up with. What's needed in Zimbabwe is to move away from having a situation where we have polarized views, and also moving to a situation where people mature politically. And the political maturity that we desire in Zimbabwe is where people start playing by the rules. I liked it when you see what happened in South Africa, that when Malema lost the election, the first thing that he did was to acknowledge that I've lost the election and congratulate the person that has won. And then go back into your place as an opposition politician and wait for the next election and still be able to advocate for what you believe in. But like, you can't spend 4 years still saying that I was robbed, and because I was robbed, everyone has to suffer. I think we have to get to a position whereby this scorched earth policy that I had a friend of mine, aimengane bhora rechikweshe, aita akagoeswa, aibva atora chikweshe chake kuti asaka bhora rapera ndakuenda kumba. That kind of mentality has to come to an end. We have to see that, like, us as politicians, we are well off by Zimbabwean standards, but the people that are suffering are the people that are being hurt by the sanctions the most. And mind you, it's not actually the rural populace. For the most part, the rural populace, the quality of life is actually better than the quality of life of Munhu arikugara kuHighfields. Because if I show you what a tobacco farmer earns, arikumusha, arikurima 2 hectares dzake, arikupuwa ma-inputs, arikupuwa free healthcare, arikupuwa chi, that person is getting more than a teacher. That person is getting more than vakomana varikuswera vachiita zvechiwindi. So you find, you then as a politician have to think about, like, what the policies and what I'm promoting, is it helping the electorate that I'm representing? Or is it an issue you could, like, okay, I'm taking my own interest above the interests of the people that I represent? Because this is a ZANU-PF, our electorate at the present moment, if we call a spade, it's a rural electorate. And the rural electorate yedu isiri kufara because mbeu tiri kuwapa, healthcare vanayo mari. And if you see production in Nyika, who's actually contributing the most towards the GDP in Nyika, it's actually ZANU-PF supporters, the farmers, the miners, makorokozi. So you with your electorate vakazara town, basa ndire kudira jecha, but zero towards the economy. So Maria Chonaka ikauya, isusu won't stop in terms of our policies, put the money to where there's the greatest production. But at the end of the day, is that what we want? No, we want everyone, we want everyone to be living well. And for everyone, let's stop this thing, agitation propaganda, creating fake abductions, putting money into Masoksana Peter Ndoro SABC, whereby every report that comes out of ANZ when you look at SABC, anytime they talk about Zimbabwe, it's just negative stuff. Are you telling me kuti Zimbabwe knows zvinhu zviri kufire? Kana moyo munotsvaga kune toilet yakabhesta, and that's what you report on. But I will tell you, go to Tembisa. Do you think Tembisa, compare to Hyphirids? It doesn't have anything on Hyphirids. Take the worst location in Zimbabwe. It's 10 times better than a location in South Africa. But they'll never report it. Because you'll find when they're reporting, they only talk about the Sanctions. They'll talk about the wine fields. They'll talk about the nice things. The Americans, when they're talking about America, in Baltimore, my sister, if you go to Baltimore, because you've got a policeman in every corner. People are getting shot almost on an hourly basis. They have extreme poverty. But you never see that. Because when they talk about America, they want you to see the nice stuff. Because that's what's important in terms of getting the credit rating in Nika. You need to keep on talking about positive stuff. But in Zimbabwe, you are only showing what's negative. Then how do you then entice the investors to come? How are you going to get that job created? So we have to change the narrative. I saw Nigeria where people were getting shot by the soldiers. And then you go and read my comments. It's like you're actually negative reporting, all the negative reporting in the world. We are the center of all negativities in the world. So that narrative has to change. Let's start loving ourselves. Because
thank you very much.
Guess what? Let me just make this point. America. Chamisa anenda holiday Florida, anenda holiday London. So, but so it's not the politicians who are suffering. So you people, as a people, you have to also pause and start thinking. Sanctions akanaka. Chimbotaza upenyu hwake. Kana anga akanaka sanctions, why is Tendai Smitty's children going to school in America? Kanakanaka ngawadzose muZimbabwe. Ngawayozedzidza paDavid Livingstone. Vagoenda kuhospital kuparire nyatwa because masanctions akanaka. Because you're calling for them. Kana akarwara cold heart, he goes to South Africa, he gets treated in South Africa. So don't call for sanctions on mwana omwe munhu ari kughetto youth who's got no options. So that's why I'm saying that our politics has to mature. Our politics has to change. We have to really show empathy for one. That's all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mukupe. We can go on and on, definitely. This was a great chat. We will continue this chat another time. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on Hot Seat Africa. We look forward to seeing you again in our next episode, and have a good evening. Unanswered, your voice unheard, your views restrained? Join me, Ruthendo every weekday from 1900 Central African Time on the Hot Seat, where the future is reimagined.